Hello, everybody. This is Ben Stein, and welcome to the Purpose Up podcast. Today, I am very excited to have with me Blake D. Bauer. Welcome, Blake.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure and honor. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. So, before we get into it, Blake, if we're at a dinner party, cocktail party, how do you describe what you do to folks who you just meet?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question, but I would say that I just help people with whatever suffering is presenting in their life. And I've struggled a lot to understand how to love and value myself as a person and as a man. And so I help people to understand how to stop hurting themselves and stop letting themselves get hurt with their habits, which you could also say, I try and help people to understand how to love and value and be true to themselves in every moment, situation, and relationship, because in my experience, the root cause of disease and depression goes back to us never learning how to love ourselves as children. And then we go through life betraying ourselves, hurting ourselves, trying to please everybody, to get love, to belong, to get security, to fit in, and we destroy ourselves inside in the process. So I try and help people understand that, and then how to stop doing that so they can create a life that is true to who they are, and one that they respect themselves for when they wake up in the morning and go to bed at night.
That is absolutely beautiful and well said. Wish I had met you in my early 20s. So
Hmm.
I think it's a profound mission, and I love the way that you relayed that. You also have written a book. You are a meditation master, into Qigong, and or Qigong master. Tell us a little bit about these other kind of facets of your identity as it relates to this mission about self-love.
Well, I guess I'll start on a more personal level. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol as a young man and really hit rock bottom very early in life, to the point where I was suicidally depressed around the age of 18 and, going into my early 20s.
Mhm.
And I was really tortured psychologically and emotionally, which is why my healing journey and my search for purpose became my primary focus at a young age. And I started practicing things like sitting meditation, which I was just having a long conversation with somebody yesterday about, really saved my life. And then eventually I studied Chinese medicine, so acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine. And that's when I started to practice Qigong, which, for those who are not familiar with it, is like Tai Chi or yoga. It's a slow moving meditation, and I found that it was the most effective way to unlock stuck blood, stuck energy, and stuck emotion in the body. And my view is that disease and depression, suffering, comes from stuck energy, stuck emotion, and stuck blood. And that all leads to a weakened immune system, cancer, as we were talking about earlier, different kinds of illnesses. So I grew to just share with people what had helped me most effectively and most practically. And so meditation and Qigong, on top of these teachings on self-love, have become kind of the foundation of my philosophy and my approach in helping people.
All right, that's beautiful. Qigong has been one of those things that I've been interested in, but have not done yet. I'm a huge meditation fan, and I also align with what you're saying about how stuck emotions can create havoc for our health and our happiness. So I've also been researching and practicing different ways to help folks release trapped emotions. But I'll have to give
Beautiful.
Qigong a try. So,
I have I have a 2 hour program online. I'm happy to give it to you as a gift so you can check it out.
all right. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So, similar to your story, I faced some dependency issues. And in my story, I tell people, I went from a hot mess to hot stuff, and took the pain from childhood and numbed it with alcohol and marijuana primarily. Um, why why is it that you think that so many of us are not taught these lessons about self-love earlier, and that we have to go through so much pain and running away from it before we can get on this path that allows us to learn these things and to treat ourselves better.
Well, I think it starts with the adults in our life never learned these lessons either, and they're struggling with the same thing. So our parents, our teachers, our religious leaders are still struggling to learn how to have a healthy relationship with themselves or how to love themselves. And so they can only teach us what they themselves have already, learned and understood. And a lot of times our parents are young and not aware and struggling and stressed out to provide for a family and keep their marriage alive, or maybe they're a single parent, and so they don't know how to value themselves. Really, they don't know how to talk about their emotions and their thoughts in healthy ways. And then a lot of us, I grew up with parents who had addictions, so there was a lot of drug addiction around me. Even the quote unquote mature adults or role models were actually very self-destructive and had never developed an inner health that they could then pass on or teach. And so I really think that this self-destructive relationship that we have with ourselves psychologically, emotionally, and physically is a conversation that is at the center of the evolution of humanity. So both the evolution of human consciousness and biological and genetic evolution. Because if we keep living in this way where we destroy ourselves, then what the result of that is we're going to destroy the people around us, and we're going to destroy the planet, which is what we're doing because we're at war inside of ourselves. And then we just make drama and war and pain around us when we're so toxic inside. And most people really aren't aware how self-destructive their relationship is to themselves mentally and emotionally and physically.
100%. As a coach, I work a lot with how people key into their inner dialogue. And once you key into what a jerk you can be to yourself, it's pretty shocking what that looks like. So how do you help people gain awareness around their relationship with themselves, and how do you help them learn to love themselves more?
Well, I help them to identify what I've kind of distilled down to be the specific patterns of self-harm. So specifically, I help them to look at their thoughts, and meditation is the most effective way to really see your mind for what it is. So I teach people meditation that goes back to the Buddhist tradition, where you just sit and observe your breathing, and you feel your body, and you observe your thoughts without adding a mantra or music or visualization. It's just watching your mind, so that you start to connect to the awareness and the consciousness that's behind the thought, and you start to connect to that part of you that is aware when you're thinking. So then your identification with the thinking mind, or the voice in your head, gets smaller and smaller, because most of us, before we really awaken, we believe we are our thoughts, and we believe we are the voices in our head, and there's not a lot of space around that, which causes a lot of confusion and anxiety and stress. So I like to help people get in touch with that awareness, that inner space, that inner consciousness. That's the part of us that can say, oh, I was just thinking about X, Y, and Z, or, oh, I was just lost in thought. So cultivating that awareness to then be able to see your thoughts clearly is very helpful. And then there's a very intimate, direct relationship between our thoughts and emotions, which a lot of people get confused about. And most of us internalize and repress our emotions throughout the day because we're not aware of what we're feeling. Two, we never learned how to express what we're feeling. And three, we never learned how to express what we're feeling very effectively, which is really honestly and kindly taking personal responsibility, accountability when we are communicating. And so as a result of all this repressed emotion, we have these symptoms that bubble up from our heart and from our body or our subconscious mind into our mind as all these crazy thoughts and crazy thinking that can be very overwhelming. And so that can set in motion this very confusing loop. So what I like to help people see is that in the present, if you are repressing your emotions, if you are internalizing what you feel, what you need, what you want out of fear or guilt or shame, whatever the thinking is that stops you, whatever the fear is that stops you, you're basically hurting and betraying yourself. So until we start to learn how to be true to ourselves every day in every situation, we're always going to be in pain, basically. And not only are we going to be in emotional pain, but it's going to cause further toxic thinking and further negative thinking. And then we just get trapped in this loop. Am I just really stuck in these voices, or is it emotional? And we don't know where to start. And so it's really important to identify that we need to work with our thoughts. We need to learn that we can choose and guide our thoughts. We need to connect to the awareness behind the voices. And then we need to get really in touch with what we're feeling and express it in the healthiest way we're able to, in the kindest, most vulnerable way we're able to in every situation, even when we're scared, even when we doubt ourselves, even when we feel guilt or shame or insecurity. So those are the two most important places that I start, because everything's being generated from within. And it's so easy to look outside of ourselves, and we all do, to look for the problem, and we can't see. It's like if I have something on my face, I can't see it, but you can see it. You can say, hey, Blake, you got something on your face. And that's where the root cause of our suffering comes from. And it's something we can't see until we are typically in a really dark place.
So in that respect, these rock bottoms can be gifts, even if they don't feel like them at the time.
Yes, and I think the whole planet's going through one right now, actually, because I think this is a big cultural wake-up call and initiation of sorts. We're in the middle of an unprecedented series of events that is comparable to world wars, to the Depression. We are going through a lot right now, and there's still going to be a lot of consequences over the coming years of what we're in the middle of right now. And these times really introduce us to our strength if we don't completely self-destruct.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with the identification of our minds with meditation and our thoughts. So um, one notion that's helped me and folks I talk to a lot is the understanding that like you said, we are not our thoughts, and that if we take a step back, realizing that our brain is an involuntary organ that just spews out thoughts similar to like our heart beats and our lungs breathe without us thinking, those thoughts will happen regardless. So allowing ourselves to take a step back and um, have our higher self drive the bus, as opposed to fear, guilt, or shame, allows us access to a lot more resourcefulness.
Absolutely.
And I sometimes think of these different parts of our brain, that fear, as almost different versions of toddlers that we have in our head, that we get to take the wheel from. So that bus analogy helps me out, think through those things. So
Absolutely. And going forward from your analogy, the thing I think we don't talk enough about, which is a practice that is very important, is that besides just being on the bus, what about getting in the driver's seat and saying, this is where we're going and why? And being very intentional. I think we all have a superpower, which is that we can choose our thoughts, and we don't realize that. And that's kind of what affirmations start to teach you. But the premise is, as you would know, where we put our attention, where we put our focus is what grows. And that's what we get more of, right? So if you're focused on the negative thinking and what's wrong in your life and complaining and blaming, well, then you get just more of that. So it's really important to ask yourself, what do I really want? What makes me feel alive and well? How can I think about this situation in a way that's empowering instead of leaves me feeling helpless? And you start to coach yourself in this way from the inside out, so that you're like, this is where I'm going and why. This is what I want to get done today. This is what I want to feel today. I want to look at this situation in a way that liberates me as opposed to keeps me stuck. Because at the end of the day, it all comes back to our own choice. So it's like, if we want to stay miserable and stay stuck and say that nobody can help me and I'm a lost cause, well, guess what? That's exactly what you're going to get. Whereas if you really want to be free from your suffering, you can be, and there is a way out for everybody if you're willing to do the work and take responsibility. And the line in the sand is, are you prepared to stop blaming and complaining and being the victim? And do you want to cross that line? And on the other side of that line is self-respect, where you say, you know what, I'm not going to wait for anything or anyone to come along and fix me or save me or heal me. I have everything I need inside of me to do this, and I'm going to do this. And we all can do it. There's nobody who can't do it. It's just about getting to that place in ourselves where it's like, I'm done wasting my time complaining, blaming, waiting for something or someone else to change. I need to do what I need to figure out, whatever I have to do to make myself well and happy. And whatever brings us to that place, I think, to our knees, the situations in my life where I really self-destructed and sabotaged everything I cared about, loved, and identified with, brought me to my knees and humbled me, brought me to that bottom. And being at that bottom, the only place to go is you either take your life or you go up. You heal yourself. You find your way out. You crawl out of that hole. And so that's the blessing of being in a dark place, is you get to, that's a choice point. Am I going to do what it takes to heal and stop giving my power away to other people, to doctors, to therapists, to my parents, to society, to these ideas that really aren't really important to me, but I'm trapped in what everybody else is doing or what I think I should be doing. And so I think that we need that pressure so that basically our ego and our conditioning can crack, and then something opens up so we can try a new approach, because obviously in a lot of cases what we've been doing is not working. And so when that's the case, you got to stop being stubborn, stop being so negative and cynical, and maybe listen to some people who have walked that path.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of gold in what you just said. And, it reminds me of a couple ways about thinking about things is, one, this victim versus responsible spectrum. And if you take the idea that you're 100% responsible for creating your reality around you, whether that is, capital T truth or not, gives you a lot more agency. So even if something is not working out for you, you get to ask the question, why did I create this? Like, how is it here to serve me? And you get to look through things through that creative perspective. And then you also get to, like you were saying, you get to figure out what you want to create instead of what's not working. And by focusing on that, you attract more of that. And there's, both psychological and energetic, rationale behind that. That's pretty sound. And then
100%.
With that, then you get to, one piece for me in this equation that was integral for me to learn, actually two pieces, is tapping into that intuition and tapping into self-compassion and learning more about self-compassion. Because I know I was comparing a lot, and I just heard this the other day, like compare equals despair, and I was shoulding on myself a lot. So when you are in that constant shoulding space, it does not leave you room to really ask yourself what you want. So curious about your thoughts on self-compassion and intuition as part of your journey.
Yeah, I would say 100% it's been the primary driving force underneath my journey, because at the age of 18, I started doing meditation and yoga and eating healthy. And as coming from being, an athlete that did a lot of drugs and drank a lot and sold drugs, to getting clean and sober, and then, not socializing, as a young man, not even dating very much. So, I went so desperately onto my healing path just because I was following my instinct, my intuition, and allowing myself, accepting that this was the thing that mattered most to me and felt true to me, as opposed to all the other things I had let drive me before, like fitting in or being cool or being loved by the girl I liked, all these things that drove me to destruction. I then started to listen just to that little voice in my heart. And I said, I'm not listening to anything or anyone else anymore. And so that was the beginning of my journey of self-love. And I didn't know consciously that I was doing it, but it all came from following my instinct and my intuition. And very simply, for people who are listening, what really feels good to you? What makes you feel alive and well? And you just take one step, one day at a time in that direction, and things start to open up and things start to fall into place. And where we get stuck and where we get confused is the pressure we put on ourselves to figure everything out. And that's often, so you want to listen to your intuition, you want to be compassionate towards what's coming up in your heart and your body, but then you think, oh God, I have to have all these answers. I have to figure out, I have to have a grand plan of how I'm going to make all this money, or take care of my family, or if I'm going to change my career, I have to have everything figured out. And it's a really an illusion that becomes a disservice to ourselves. And that's why coming back to practices like meditation or yoga that help you be more present, so you can just, have your heart open, your mind open, be in your life, be in your day, be in your moment, and take one step at a time and trust you're doing your best each day. That's all you can do. You can't do more. And then things will start to fall into place when you're coming from that place. But typically we're stuck in fear, and that fear stops us from listening to our intuition and stops us from being compassionate, from loving ourselves. Um, so again, that line in the sand is learning that what you've been doing hasn't been working. So you've got to be true to yourself, even though you're scared. You've got to take time to take care of yourself, even though you're scared. You've got to follow your heart, even if your hands and your body is shaking, because that's what you haven't been doing. And that's the root of the problem. And that's what you need to start doing.
We're speaking the same language, and I love what you're sharing. That ability to practice courage, the ability to walk through that fear, is so powerful. And I actually wrote a kid's book about that, little Benny Piggy, in Courage for the Win, and it was about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I think that is like our ability to face fear and walk into it, and our ability to do that quickly and do that more and bigger is directly related to our ability to how we get to grow and show up. So I think it's super important that you bring that up. And it's not that anyone who has everything kind of quote figured out doesn't have fear. They just have a different relationship with it, and they embrace it rather than run away. And that addiction can often look like that, running away. And even if it is, an addiction to phone, not wanting to sit with your own feelings. But when we ask ourselves, what am I afraid of, and what's on the other side of that fear, and what action do I need to take, there's some powerful answers in there. And like you said, when we take the time to quiet down and listen to ourselves, it allows us to see more clearly. And I often relay when I'm talking with folks about this is I used to be, and still am, one of those guys that does want to figure everything out. And I use the metaphor of, the Legend of Zelda, when you've got like a block or two in front of you illuminated, and you just take that next step, similar to what you were saying, and you don't have the whole map, uncovered just yet. You just got to figure out what's next instead of figuring out the whole thing out. And then that way you make progress.
Absolutely. And two things that popped into my head that I just wanted to say is that I think we do ourselves a big disservice when we don't realize that it's not about being fearless. I think a lot of us think about courage in terms of being fearless, and the fear doesn't go away. It just loses its power over you. And I think it's really important to have that perspective, because often before we express our feelings in a situation we're struggling to express our feelings, or in a situation where we want to follow our heart but we're afraid to follow our heart, or in a situation where we want to take time and space just for ourselves but we're afraid of disappointing other people, that fear, that insecurity is there, then eventually you realize, I got to do this. I got to take the leap. I got to express myself. I got to be true to myself. I got to follow my heart. I got to take some time for myself. I really need this to be a benefit to the people around me. Then you muster up the courage and you do it, even though you're scared. And because you've wired your brain and your nervous system from this fear and insecurity for so many years, there's this big pothole after the leap. And the first you feel euphoric, like you're liberated, you did it. And then typically we fall right into this pothole because the fear and the insecurity doesn't go away, and the self-doubt doesn't go away right away. Because if you've been building up fear in your nervous system and in your neurological pathways for 20, 30, 40 years, it doesn't go away the first time you overcome your fears in a big way. It takes time. And over time, through exercising this self-compassion, through listening to your intuition, through basically being true to yourself, even though you are scared, the love inside you, the truth inside you, the healthy energy inside you basically eats the fear like Pac-Man. It transforms it. But that's continual repetition, and that's how you rewire your nervous system and you rewire your brain, your neurological pathways. So I like to set people up for success by telling them that once you do this, the self-doubt's going to come back, the fear is going to come back. So you need to know that, and then not just turn in on yourself like you just ruined everything because you finally were honest. And a lot of people then just go back into their hole and think, I should never have listened to these guys because they were leading me down the wrong path, which is not the truth. It's just your fear and your self-doubt is very strong, and it's going to come back up.
Yes. And, to that end, when we learn new skills, we're often not great at them right off the bat. So whether it is, expressing your feelings to someone, or whether it's, thinking about a new job or a side hustle, you're probably going to be bad at those things as you gain new skills doing those things. So it's also that compassion to give yourself permission to be bad at something before you're good at it, and accepting that as part of the process along the way, and having that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset in that process. And that takes a lot of that judgment and pressure off you.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
How do people get started with this? Is it with the practices, physically, and the habits? Is it with the vision? Where do people get started? When you work with them, or when you advise them on how to tackle some of these pretty big questions that we've talked about, and we've talked about a lot of different things. What's like a simple way that you recommend they get started?
I guess, there's three things that pop into mind as the most important. The first is everybody needs to try 10 minutes of meditation first thing in the morning. So when you wake up, I'm sure everybody knows very well how you have got all these thoughts and they're all over the place. And then you typically get out of bed and you're anxious and you're rushing around, you're stressed, you're trying to get ready, trying to be on top of all this stuff. But that energy that you wake up with and those thoughts that you wake up with basically create your day. They set the tone for your day. They shape the day. They're the dominoes that you send out in front of you. So then later down the road, when you have, a fight with someone, the energy that started that fight was present in the morning because you were reacting as soon as you get out of bed. You weren't coming from your center. You were rushing. You were scared. You were insecure. You were stressed out. You were spread thin. So first thing in the morning, sitting down and doing just 10 minutes of meditation. I use 10 minutes because 10 minutes is enough to drop into those deeper states of consciousness. And 10 minutes is enough to see your thoughts for what they are and not chase them and not get lost in them, and to come back to your breathing, to come back to your body. And after 10 minutes, you're going to be a lot more present. Your mind's going to be a lot quieter, and you're going to have harnessed your energy and your power to create the day in the way you want, instead of waking up and being the victim of these negative thoughts and then being basically hurt by your own thoughts and behavior all day. So the thoughts we think in the morning create and shape our day, basically. And so we've got to work with the subconscious mind and work with those thoughts first thing in the morning. And so for anybody who's listening, there's really no excuse for 10 minutes in the morning. And if you're making an excuse, that's your own BS, and you need to call yourself on it. And the other part is, if you say, I can't meditate, that thought, that belief is also BS, but you keep feeling that and experiencing it because you keep thinking and believing it. And so you don't have to be a perfect meditator, and there's no right or wrong. You just basically need to sit down and do nothing except for focus on your breathing and your body, no matter what your crazy mind says, or no matter what you think you have to do, and just not move for 10 minutes. And so I know you're a parent. For the parents out there, if you have to lock yourself in the bathroom with some earplugs, go get some earplugs and lock yourself in the bathroom and tell everybody you need 10 minutes for yourself. So where there is a will, there's a way. And this is probably the single most important thing you can do.
Let
The
me
second,
let
go
me
ahead.
jump in there
Yeah,
before you go to number
yeah,
two.
yeah.
Speaking about the BS story, a lot of folks will say that I've tried meditation, I'm not good at it, and it's a great example to learn self-compassion, because meditation is not about having a totally blank slate. And as thought pop in, it's not a bad thing. It's just the rep in meditation is going back to focusing on breathing or focusing on a mantra if that's your thing. And it's an opportunity to practice self-compassion, being like, oh, I had a thought, let me gently let it go, and then go back to whatever you're doing. So you get to practice self-compassion. Your mind's going to have thoughts anyway. You just get to be the observer of that. The point isn't to just be totally blank. So for those that are in the camp of I've tried it, I'm not good at it, think about it like that.
So important. And because it's not about being good at it. And so even that narrative is, if you look at that narrative objectively, it's a symptom of our unhealthy relationship to ourselves, because we're just saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing it right. We're basically making ourselves wrong and judging and criticizing ourselves, which is what we're trying to heal. So if you let that thought sabotage you from sitting down and just sitting and being with yourself, um, then you're going to allow yourself to keep hurting yourself and letting yourself get hurt, because you can't see the block for what it is. So like you were alluding to, it's just about sitting and being with yourself regardless of what comes up. And that really is part of self-acceptance, is just being able to be with whatever thoughts and feelings come up without having to make them right or wrong or act on them, and just being with them, just sitting with them. So it's so important. There is no good when it comes to meditation. It's just healthy to sit down and do nothing for a certain period of time, which is an integral act of self-love and healing that if you bypass, there's always going to be a part of you that you can't heal, because you're not going to the depths of your mind, to the core of your mind, and healing it where it needs to be healed, and seeing it, looking at it clearly, and not be afraid of those voices, not being afraid what's there inside. And then the second thing practically is that in your life right now, where you're not true to yourself, so where you're not expressing your emotions, your needs, your feelings, and following your heart, is basically a habit of self-betrayal and self-harm that you've been repeating every day for your whole life in some way. So all you need to do is look at where you're doing it right now, because it's the same habit you did yesterday and last week and last month and last year and last decade. And so the habit is present now. So we all need to just identify, where is fear or guilt or shame or insecurity stopping me from being true to myself with my partner, with a family member, with a friend, at work? Where am I kind of living a lie? Where am I betraying myself? Where am I, abandoning something that's true for me inside? And then this is where that conversation we were having comes back. I have to start talking about this, even though I'm scared. And so it's simple, but it's probably the hardest thing you're going to do, between, sitting and facing your mind and talking about what's in your heart when you're scared. I mean, these are, we think it's hard to climb Mount Everest or jump out of an airplane, but these two things are much harder and much more important. And so those two, so taking care of your mind in that way, starting to be true to yourself, even and especially where you're scared. And the third thing that's tied up with those two is you got to take time and space for yourself. So, if you're a parent, and especially in this, going through probably a second lockdown or half lockdown and the pandemic, and not being able to go to the gym or go out or go to work in the same ways that we do, whether we were in this situation or not, everybody needs a bit of time and space for themselves every day, at least a half hour, maybe an hour to yourself, to have a walk, to have a coffee, to meditate, to exercise, to be with yourself, so you can just listen to what's going on inside and not be so distracted by everybody else's thoughts and feelings and opinions, or what's on the news, or what's on your cell phone, or what's in your inbox. So you need little time and space for yourself. And what people will notice when they try to make that a part of their daily or weekly regimen is that the same fear and guilt and insecurity pops its head up. And all those thoughts that stop you from taking time to care for yourself come up. So they all build on each other and help you see things clearly, take better care of yourself, understand how it feels, that it actually feels good to take care of yourself, and then that you need to be true to yourself in each situation where you're basically hiding some of the truth just to survive and get by, because the implications of being totally honest and authentic seem so daunting. So you go back into your shell like a turtle, but then you're just stuck in that loop in the same situation at work or your marriage or in your family. And then the problem never goes away. It actually just gets worse until you're forced to address it.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of gold that you just shared there again. And what comes up for me is, when you talk about, for example, intimacy with a partner, sometimes we're not totally aware that we're not being truthful with ourselves, and our lies to ourselves seem very believable. So take the example of, I don't want to express my feelings to my partner because I know it's going to trigger her and set her off. And it's just probably easier for me to deal with this uncomfortableness rather than set her off. So therefore, I'm being a good person by shouldering this and not really sharing it with her. Right.
Absolutely.
And so that way we kind of kid ourselves that we're being a good person, and we create more of this kind of toxic repression. And there's a further lack of intimacy because we're not being honest and truthful. And, it is a process to develop that intimacy, and it is a practice, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And I think if there is someone in your life that can teach you how the art of a difficult conversation where you can express yourself and do it in a way that um, uh, allows the other person to hear you instead of maybe go on the defensive, it's an amazing skill to learn that's part of this process.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Such an important example.
100%. So we've talked about 1, 2, and 3. In your own journey of this self-realization, you talked about hitting rock bottom. You talked about developing these core habits that have helped you. And what are some of the kind of biggest ahas that you've had along the way as you've kind of further evolved that you think are important for people to know?
A good question. Thank you. I guess so. In the beginning, and this is the overarching theme, is that, I went to 5 different universities. I read thousands of books. I studied with spiritual masters, spent years and hours every day in deep spiritual practice. And what I came to realize is that I was just looking for love and learning how to love myself. So my healing journey and my search for purpose was really me just looking for love. And I was looking for the love I never got as a child because my parents were going through their own stuff. I was looking for the love I never learned how to give myself because I never learned how to love myself. And I was looking for the love that I am, because I believe that when we're looking for ourself, it means we're looking for love. And I think one of the words that best describes our true nature, even though words fall short to of the truth that they point to, I think, especially probably as a father, this in yourself, that I think one of the most accurate ways of describing our essence is that it is pure love. So I feel I was looking for the love that I am in the outer world, in a woman, in a teacher, I was in my friends, but I didn't realize that I was looking for me and that I was the love I was looking for. And I think that that's a truth underneath everybody's path. And then in order to discover that truth, I was instinctually learning how to love myself. And I didn't realize that. So all these top educational experiences, all these trainings, all these practices. It was really just me learning how to love and take care of myself, how to value the miracle of my life, not take it for granted. And then that was the key to not taking the people around me for granted that I love and care about, and thus treating them well, treating the planet well. And it's not so complicated. I think we make it so complicated because we're confused and we're lost in our conditioning, all this thinking and these beliefs that really lead us to dead ends in a lot of way, and to suffering. So that was my biggest, because I didn't feel lovable. I didn't know how to love myself. So I was living in a way, and one of my core wounds was that I would always betray myself for love, to be liked, to feel secure, to be accepted, to be cool. But meanwhile, I was destroying myself inside. And I realized, we all do this in some way with our friends when we're young, or a girlfriend, or our parents, and then at work when we're older, or with our wife or our partner or our husband when we're older, or with our children. I realize everybody's doing the same thing because we never learned this. It's not taught in schools. It's not taught in church or synagogue. It's not taught when you go to the doctor or even to your psychiatrist. And so that's where my mission to share this with as many people as I could came for. And part of that was this realization, which is really confrontational, which is that I think everybody is selfish. I think human nature has selfishness and selflessness as together, because we are loving, good people, but nature was designed to be selfish in terms of self-preservation and evolution. And the metaphor I always go back to is the apple tree. If the apple tree doesn't selfishly take what it needs from the earth, from the sun, from the atmosphere, it can't grow into this strong, abundant apple tree that does what? It becomes of significant benefit to everything and everyone around it. It gives oxygen, it gives shade, it gives food and sustenance, it provides homes for animals and bugs, and then firewood. And that's how we are. We're not separate from nature. So we need to get the things we need to be well, to be of benefit to other people. And I'm sure you know this in yourself and your clients. When we start to understand or try to value ourselves and take better care of ourselves, we all come face to face with this guilt. And that's connected to the fear we've been talking about. Like, am I being selfish, too selfish for wanting this for myself? Because maybe we've been so used to just doing for others, or that's the expectation, or that's what our mother did, or that's what our father did. And so we start to question, is it wrong to want to love myself? Is it too selfish? And so that's why I like to have the conversation around selfishness. And in my book, I talk about the difference between healthy selfishness and unhealthy selfishness. And unhealthy selfishness gives self-love, which is healthy selfishness, a bad name, because when you repress your emotions or you don't follow your heart because you think that's too selfish, that's actually unhealthy selfishness, because you're repressing your emotions. You're not being true to yourself, which leads you to be resentful, angry, drink too much, eat too much, be depressed, not be of benefit. But we don't see this narrative clearly. And so, I guess to the listeners, you're not wrong or a bad person for having these feelings or these needs or the desire to feel well and to be happy. It's actually very natural. And a lot of times when you've grown up with parents that weren't that happy or healthy, you feel like there's something wrong with you for wanting to be healthy and happy. And so you're the only one who can give yourself permission to do this. And at the end of the day, we have to be the one that says, my feelings matter. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. My feelings matter. My needs matter. My dreams, my goals matter. And a lot of times that's a lonely process. You're alone in that, because if you don't claim your own worth and your own value, and you're waiting for your partner to do it, or your friend to do it, or a lover to do it, or your parents to do it, you could be waiting till you get to your deathbed, and then you're going to die with a lot of regret. So I would say, don't wait so long to say you matter. And don't let this belief that being true to yourself is selfish or wrong stop you anymore, because you won't be of benefit to anybody, and you're not going to enjoy your time here. And we want to enjoy our time here and then be of benefit to the people around us.
Yeah. that it brings up a couple things for me. One, a thought that I haven't thought in a while, or a memory of a thought, which is, before, I went down the coaching path, and before, I started my healing journey, I was a pretty heavy, binge social drinker. And I remember thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great if my parents could recognize this and just kind of put me in a rehab so I wouldn't have to do it myself, or admit the problem myself. They could just recognize it in me. And so, seeing it now, from this perspective as that victim mentality, and not really taking ownership of it, but wanting someone to come and rescue me. And so it speaks to what you're saying about, it's not going to happen, most likely. And then, number two is, as someone who is an entrepreneur now, and who is a dad of two young kids, I wake up early, around 5:30 before my kids wake up, to practice that self-care. And that's my time. Sometimes it doesn't always work out because, especially with a 9-month-old, they're not always on schedule. So, to that end, sometimes when I'm in my work day, I use that time for myself, but there's still, I still get to recognize that, like, are you being productive? Is this the right thing to do? And it's a reminder to myself. It's like, like you were saying earlier, this is going to set the tone, and this is part of how you, moderate your vibration and show up for people. So, if you're preaching this stuff, you got to be able to do it. So yes, like, practice self-care.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And for your listeners, it is challenging. And some days, right, you fall off the horse, but that doesn't mean you give up and you don't get back on the horse, right? The Zen koan, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And that's what this is. It doesn't matter how many times you think a negative thought. It doesn't matter how many times you know don't express yourself because you're scared. It's that that you need to, and that you keep working on it. And that's what our time here is about. We keep growing, right? You either growing or you're dying. And so I think it doesn't matter even how good you get at this. And that's, people ask me when I teach my retreats, so do you still get challenged, and things like that? And I say every day, because it doesn't matter how great I do today at valuing myself and taking care of myself, because guess what? Someone's going to test me tomorrow, right? My family member will test me. Someone driving on the street that's angry is going to test me. A business relationship that I have where I need to value myself and not be taken advantage of is going to test me. It pops its head up in every way. I'll have an old thought pop up when I wake up in the morning that'll test me. We could be in the middle of a pandemic or an election that might be contested. That's a huge thing for the world right now. And so, there's always going to be things that test you, but the more you do this, the more you trust yourself that you have the tools, you know how to find the medicine you need, you have access to these practices. And I think that's just one thing that I want everybody to hear, is that there are good tools out there. And just, you listen to this, you look for more podcasts, listen to more YouTube videos, take meditation classes online, take workshops online, talk to a therapist. Don't give up on yourself. There are good people out there who just want to help and not take advantage of you. And I think a lot of people get, disheartened because the people that they've trusted have hurt them. There's a lot of people just trying to sell stuff in this industry. But if you keep sifting through the crap, excuse my language, you will find good people. There are good people out there that will show up for you, sometimes more so than people in your life that are close to you show up for you.
100%. I want to go back to when you opened us up, and you first were talking about this power of self-love. Initially, as a man, I know there's, like, even as what I consider a relatively evolved man, there's some part of me that's uncomfortable talking about that. And maybe it's that hurt teenager inside of me that was like, oh, well, vulnerability, that's bad news. But I wanted to touch on that, because I think it's tough for men to talk about love and not feel silly. And curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, that is, again, another loaded but very important topic. And I think when it comes back to all the things we've been talking about, in your life right now, where you're not being true to yourself emotionally, for example, or following your heart, again, it comes back to that, right? Because if you're with your family, you want to be able to tell them that you love them. If you're with your partner, your wife, your husband, whatever, you want to be able to tell them that you love them and not be afraid of being rejected or being too vulnerable or being taken advantage of. And then that brings up, again, the practices we keep talking about so you're aware of your thoughts and your beliefs, because you started to identify some of these thoughts and beliefs that really don't serve you. And so if you get too hooked to those thoughts anymore, they're going to stop you from being the most loving, vulnerable expression of yourself, which is really the healthiest expression of yourself. So again, going back to meditation, so I can look at, you know what, I'm not telling my wife I love her enough, or I'm not telling my mother or my father I love them enough, or I'm not following my heart 100% because I'm afraid I'm going to fail, or I'm afraid of like what my dad will think, or what my wife will think, or what my friends will think. And then you start to see that. But at the end of the day, it's like, are you being true to yourself, or are you betraying yourself because of that belief and because of that fear? And so I would start to look in terms of that context. And a lot of us, a lot of men mistake and misunderstand strength as being the opposite of being vulnerable, and that is really the old paradigm. And it didn't work for a lot of our parents and us men who still play that game and play that role. It doesn't work for us. And again, it comes back to what I was saying before we brought up this next topic, was that as men, we have to say our feelings matter. We have to say our needs and our dreams matter. It's just the same. So, the archetype is that, right, for the traditional male-female role, is that a woman, is a mother or a wife and takes care of the house. And a lot of women feel unappreciated and misunderstood. And there's a breakdown in communication. Well, the opposite and the same is true for men. A lot of men feel misunderstood, unappreciated. There's a lot of weight on our shoulders to be a provider, to be strong for the family, to not break down. Because if I break down, how am I going to keep this whole thing going? And will she love me? And what will my kids think of me? And what will my parents think about me? And what will my friends think about me? But men, we have not been good traditionally in talking about this stuff. So what do? We just go drink with each other, or we go work out, or we overwork. And because, like, going back to what you were saying about intimacy, because we don't open up about these deeper struggles. And that's like the saying of, we carry the sins of our fathers. It's like our fathers, our grandfathers, our uncles, they didn't know how to open up about these things. And so this was passed down in our environment and genetically, biologically. And so it comes up for us because we are the evolution of our bloodline, and we are the evolution of consciousness right here, right now, today. And so as a male to be a healthy embodiment of this male energy, we need to start opening up about this stuff. And I think, one thing is a lot of us don't have really good examples of that. And that's why it's so important to become, I think, what you're looking for. For me, I was running around the world looking for this embodiment of strength and wisdom and love, something that wasn't too, left, something that wasn't too right, something that was right in the middle, that for me felt real and true and vulnerable, but also logical and also sensitive and really switched on, but also very open. And through being disappointed in what I found in the world, I realized that I became what I was looking for. And so I think we have to become what we're looking for. And then the more men that are loving and open and clear and strong, then more men want to be like that too. And they realize that's what women need. That's what the children need. That's what we need. That's what the world needs. That's how you're a true leader. All these things then fall into place. And so, but again, these are all great awarenesses, but it all comes back to sitting with your mind in the morning. So you're aware of these thoughts and beliefs when they arise. You're aware of these blocks when they come up. And then being aware of what you're feeling and realizing, oh, I'm not telling my wife what I feel because of X, Y, and Z, and that story doesn't serve me. And I'm not telling my parents, or I'm not telling my friends because I'm afraid they'll judge me, or I'll lose my job, or I'll lose their respect. And all those narratives based on fear or shame are our blocks. So then we got to be true to ourselves no matter what.
I love it. I love it. Blake, what have we not covered today that you think is important for listeners? And we've covered so much, so thank you for that. But is there anything else as we land the plane that you think is good for folks to know?
Well, I guess a topic that's popped into my head twice, and I think it ties all this up really well, is forgiveness. And I think maybe the relationship between forgiveness and self-respect. So you can't respect yourself and be at peace if you keep doing the things we've been talking about. If you keep allowing your mind to go unchecked, if you keep holding in what you're really feeling, and then when you do that, you end up reacting and saying things that you don't mean because you're combusting inside, and then you just react and you get angry and you get frustrated and you say things you don't mean because you're not practicing actually saying what you do mean. So then you end up pushing everybody away, and then you're left feeling guilty and ashamed. And then that's what brings up this topic of forgiveness, because really we want to be able to forgive ourselves and forgive the people around us, because everybody's just learning. And so the key to that is you got to stop hurting yourself, and you got to stop letting yourself get hurt. And the way to do that is what we've been talking about: doing the meditation, being true to yourself, taking time for yourself. That's how you stop hurting yourself, which means you're not creating more that you need to forgive yourself for, right? That's how you stop hurting other people, because you become more mindful and you're not self-destructive. So you stop creating things to forgive yourself for. And then when you stick up for yourself and you're true to yourself, you don't let yourself be taken advantage of or be mistreated, because you're honoring yourself, you're valuing yourself, you're sticking up for yourself. So then there's nothing else to forgive. So all these habits and practices I keep circling back to is how you end up forgiving yourself, forgiving the people who have hurt you, because you realize, I got hurt because I never learned how to love myself. I hurt myself because I never learned how to love myself practically. So I have to stop hurting myself today, stop letting myself get hurt today. And then you live each day feeling that you respect yourself. And that's what everything comes back to, right? It doesn't matter how much money we make, or how many things we have, or how attractive our partner is, or how great our body looks. You want to look in the mirror, not at your body, not at the things around you, not how nice the mirror is. You want to look in your eyes, right? And you want to respect that soul, that truth, that is that quiet place in your heart where you know the truth about everything in your life. And you want to look into that part of you, and you want to respect yourself for who you are and how you are, so that when you die, that part of you is not riddled with regret. And that, when that time comes, could be tomorrow or next week or next year or in 50 years. But we got to take care of it each day to make sure that when that time comes, we do respect ourselves and we're not full of regret. And then I think the last thing I'll say, as a parent, I'm sure you've thought about this now, is like, what is my legacy? What's the memory I'm leaving for my loved ones and for the world? And so, whatever you think you're hiding, everybody around you feels it and sees it, even if they don't articulate it, right? Like, I'm sure your kids are so intuitive, even when you don't want them to be, like, Daddy, what's wrong? And you're like, nothing's wrong. But deep down, like, you're thinking about something, you're preoccupied, and they see. So what's our legacy? And so all these habits we've been talking about is how you leave a legacy that's healthy for yourself. And if you don't value yourself enough, do it for your kids, do it for your loved ones, do it for the people you care about.
All right. It's an amazing call to action to tie things up. And, I love the saying that life is now. And, as you were saying, no day is guaranteed. So oftentimes we can put this off because it seems too big or daunting, but even making some small changes and even trying something out making that progress makes all the difference. And in those days adding up to, like you said, being able to look yourself in the mirror and really feel proud of how you're showing up versus, any alternative.
Absolutely.
All right. Beautiful, Blake. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for being vulnerable and sharing all of that with us. Where can folks learn more about you and all the good things you're up to?
Well, I think I always like to share my book as being the most practical thing. It's on Amazon. The title is You Were Not Born to Suffer. It's affordable and it's very effective. So if you're having trouble getting good help or finding good help or good guidance, I recommend get the book, buy a 99-cent notebook and do all the exercises and write your answers down, because it will clean house all the stuff that's stuck in your body from your childhood and your life. It will help you get it out. And that's the first step to moving a mountain or moving a boulder that's been sitting for a long time. And then I'm on all the social media platforms.
All right. And we'll have links in the show notes as well. Appreciate you showing up for us and sharing. This was really valuable, and I thank you.
Oh, Ben, thank you. You too. It was a great conversation.
All right. Look forward to connecting more soon.
Thank you.